Chris Lee, the host of the Founder podcast, right? Podcast that's just been going on for a while. It's a podcast that I've listened to a lot recently, preparing for this. And for those that don't know, it's number 13, I believe, on Apple in business. And then it's like, I saw in your story yesterday, or was it might have been today, where you posted it was like two spots behind Jake Paul's podcast. It's pretty funny. Of like
Yeah.
all podcasts on Apple. It's pretty cool. But for those that don't know, Chris has exited a nine-figure solar contracting company, which he still is currently part of. So I think this episode will be so helpful for a lot of people looking to scale, especially if you're at the seven-figure mark or eight-figure mark. But we're just gonna get right into it, and I want to start off with a different angle. I don't think I've started like this with anyone yet. But first of all, Chris, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
Just turned 40 in February.
The big 4-0.
The big 4-0.
Right.
Yeah.
The big 4-0. That's nice. And would you consider yourself semi-retired?
Yeah, semi-retired is probably the right way to put it. I tried retirement for about 6 weeks and it was terrible. And so, I definitely have a daily purpose, but lot of flexibility as far as my work schedule goes. I try not to miss too many ball games or those type of things with my kids and family. So
Nice. And I know you're a big family man, right? Like you really care about your family. You have an amazing wife and kids, and you've been married for quite a long time, right? You got married to who you call your childhood sweetheart, high school sweetheart.
yeah, my high school sweetheart. Yeah, we've been married for 19 and a half years. Well, let me think here. Now 18 and a half years. It'll be 19 years this fall. And yeah, been with her since I was 16, so 24 years that we've been together.
We're gonna get into like your roller coaster of an entrepreneurship, right? Like the absolute crazy journey you've had that spans like over a decade in total, well over a decade. Would you say like being married and having like a stable relationship, how was it when you were going through like all the ups and downs? Did you have like moments in your relationship where maybe that was being affected by that up and down type of nature in as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, there's no perfect relationship, and you go through moments of greatness and moments of weakness, and but yeah, we during the ups and downs, it's never been perfect, but we've always been trying, we've always worked at it, and I would say that she's always been my anchor, and really my family has always been my anchor through the struggles and through the even the times of flourishing, right? Like keeping me humble and helping me remember what life is all about. And so, a lot of entrepreneurs, they build a business and then try to build a family around it. I chose to build a family and build a business around it. And that is one thing that I've never regretted. It's been, without my wife by my side, I definitely wouldn't be where I'm at today.
It's interesting because I think based off like all the clips you see, right, of like millionaires talking about how they got started, all the downs they've had, whether it's people as famous like Alex Hormozy or, you know, us from the UK will know who Peter Jones is. He's famously lived in his car for like a number of years. When you did have nothing, right? Because there was a moment where you literally had pretty much nothing. I mean, I feel like having a family and having that type of stress over your head, having those responsibilities, like it's just so hard, so much harder as opposed to someone who's just completely on their own. They have nothing to risk. They have no that they can literally risk it all, right? Like they wouldn't mind like Peter Jones. I'm sure he didn't mind living in a car for a few years on his own because it's his life that was being affected rather than someone else. When you had a family, right, and you had nothing, like how did that feel?
You know, the not being able to do that with a family is really just a mentality shift, right? Like first of all, you got to find a woman that's going to be totally fine with nothing, right? And so for me, my wife and I, everything that we've ever had has just been viewed as like a cherry on top because we had each other, and we started with nothing. When I got married, she had just turned 20. I was 21. I had $1,000 in my bank account. I owed $1,000 to a guy for $1,000 car that he let me borrow, essentially. And so my net worth was zero when we started, and my wife didn't. My wife never ever married me for the amount of money that I had. It was always for the potential of who we could become together. And so later in life, when we lost everything, it was just like, hey, we were starting over, but we were starting over financially, but we weren't starting over, right? Because the key thing is like, success is never tied to the things that you have. It's what you've become and the abilities that you now have generated and created. And that's something that I knew that, like, even at the pit of despair in 2000, end of 2010 and the start of 2011, when I filed bankruptcy for 2.2 million. I had less than $1,000 in my bank account. My car was repoed from my driveway. My business had seen a massive failure, and my third child was on the way. Right, it was just me, my wife, my two kids, and my third baby coming. Like, there wasn't ever a moment of panic. Even though it sucked and it wasn't fun and it was hard, it wasn't like, what are we doing? Like, the life's not working. Let's quit. It was just like, hey, we just got to keep going, learn from what we've done. And I think, frankly, it has been like our secret sauce that we've never been afraid to lose it all, because we did lose it all. Since we lost it all, we knew what that was like to experience. And so, like, everything above that was potential gain. And I think most entrepreneurs don't take the risks or the proper actions because they're always scared of the bottom. So, lucky for me, I experienced the bottom, realized it wasn't that bad, and so, like, at any point, I'm totally fine. You could take everything I have, and I'm gonna be all right.
Yeah, it's crazy because when you're at that point, I mean, you have everything to gain, right? And even though, like you said, it probably does suck when you're in that situation, but then you have nothing to lose and you do have everything to gain. And any type of progression is always going up rather than going down, because you literally can't get in any worse of a situation. Now let's rewind a bit from that point, right? Because you actually built a decent company before that, right? What was that company, and where did it all go wrong with that one?
It was an okay company. I would never call it like a success. I wanted to appear successful to my peers and to my customers and everything else. Um, we raised some money in 2008. I actually convinced my father-in-law to invest $1 million into our business, because up until that point, I'd been very successful in door-to-door sales, in in the home service and product industry. And so, there was no reason why I wouldn't be able to go and be successful. I thought I knew everything at that point. I was 24 years old, and said to myself, man, if I could sell it and I see how operations are run, like, why can't I go and do it all myself? And at that point, I was so confident I could sell ice to an Eskimo. And so, getting $1 million from my father-in-law, who was a pretty successful farmer at that time, I was able to convince him. And frankly, like, that, uh, at that point, I could have convinced anybody to come and invest in us, because I had a spreadsheet, and, this is how you're going to be worth millions of dollars based on this investment, and so on and so forth. And, at that time, the economy was crashing, and I had my blinders on, and wasn't really paying attention to the things going on. And then I just made a lot of poor decisions, tried growing for growth's sake, tried impressing others from a standpoint of charging the least in the marketplace, paying the most to my sales reps, which led to razor thin margins, and doing things like driving fancy cars and things like that I just had never been accustomed to, and was doing things that were just kind of outside of my comfort zone. from like who I was, and so we built that to we had like 5 locations, but we were operating, just redlining it, and then ultimately, the economy crashed. Banks started saying that they would not buy the contracts that we were selling anymore. It was in the home security space, and the way that it was structured, we sell a customer contract and then flip that contract to somebody else. And we had a company that was buying them, and then we had an agreement that we couldn't sell them to anybody else, but they could only buy so many a month, and we needed so many to be able to break even. And yeah, it just ended up being a real big mess, and so a lot of poor choices and partnerships and everything. And knowing what I know now, like, I would have been able to confront the situation way better. But man, I was an idiot. I was young, dumb, didn't know what I was doing. And probably the biggest mistake that I made is I did not ask for help. I did not turn to people because I was so prideful. I didn't want anybody else to know what I was going through, the failure that I was experiencing. And so what I've learned now is, like, when you go through that, go to people, because everybody's been through a struggle or a hard time, and they have a unique perspective that they can help you on. But I didn't realize that. And for me, it was just more about, like I said, impressing people. And it was funny because, like, when I'm going through all this, I'm still appearing pretty dang successful. Like, I'm still driving the nice car and everything. And it wasn't until the car got repoed that people were like, "Hey, where's the car?" And I'm like, "Oh, we just decided to sell it." I started lying about it, covering up like the truth. I just didn't accept the truth for what it was. And that's really what ultimately bit me in the butt. And like I said, knowing what I know now, had I gone to mentors, I think I would have been able to make it through. I figured out a solution, not, kept fighting or whatnot, and not turn to bankruptcy. And frankly, bankruptcy is like one of my biggest regrets in my life. Although it was a fantastic, gave me a clean slate and start over. Um, I gave up too early, and it haunted me for a long time. It still haunts me to this day. If I go and fill out any type of application, I start a new business, I do anything, there's always a line on there. It doesn't ask you, have you filed bankruptcy in the last 3 years or 7 years? It says, have you ever filed bankruptcy? And every single time I have to say yes, and I got to write this big explanation of why I do it. And there's always just like this question, and so um, yeah, it was a massive failure, but a lot of great lessons learned.
That's an amazing like story of where you came from, because your story is different and unique. Because a lot of people, when that happens to them, like, they probably think entrepreneurship is not for me. Like, this is I'm not going back into this. I'm never touching this ever again. I'm just gonna get a 9 to 5 job, be happy for the rest of my life, live peacefully, live without any of that stress. And although you kind of did that, which we'll get into, but at the same time you didn't, because you knew it wasn't worth for you. How did it feel to, in that moment, was that the thoughts that were going through your head, like, that I'm gonna go to back to a 9 to 5, or were you kind of adamant that no, I'm gonna either start a new business or do something else?
Well, I mean, at that point in my life, I had a decision to make. Leading up to starting my first business, I had always planned to be a doctor, right? That was my plan from age 6 on. My my dad was a school teacher, and we didn't have any money, but my mom's dad was a doctor, and he was the only example in my life of money. And so I thought all growing up that if I want to be rich, I got to be a doctor. And so when I failed, the thought went through my mind, like, do I just go back to school and go to med school and go this route? Or, or do I take what I learned and go and grow? And there was a lot of people that came to me and just like, hey, just quit chasing the money. They would say things like owning a business or entrepreneurship isn't for you. And it was interesting. Like, at that point, I had the decision. I decided that I was going to take and learn and grow from what I had. And so I would take these things that people would say and I'd write it down on my phone and keep it with me. And so whenever I was like struggling, I'd look back at it and like gain fuel from it. And so after that, when I decided I was going to get right back into it, I immediately launched another business at the end of 2010 and 2011 in the same exact industry, because I had figured out what I had done wrong. I had shed myself of partnerships that weren't working for me, and started doing things like charging more, not trying to impress my customers, paying less to get healthier margins, controlling all operations. But the issue at this point in my life was I was scared of growth, right? Like I wanted to own a business and I knew how to run a successful business, but I was scared of debt, I was scared of growth, I was just scared of all the things that had caused me failure. And so I thought really small at this point, and but I was willing to try anything. And over the next couple of years, 2011 and 2012, I started all kinds of businesses. I was flipping cars, flipping houses, a medical pendant company, a coupon book. Uh, I had I owned livestock and bees, and I would take things from Costco and flip them online through eBay. I was doing everything that I knew how to make a buck, and I was controlling it all. This very just like micromanaged type feel, and so like my home security business only had like 6 employees, and I was scared to grow it outside of that one location and more employees. And me and my business partner, I selected another business partner that I had some really good history with, and we did a lot. We would sell and we would install it and we would do the books and we do everything else, and which I think a lot of people in the home service industry find themselves in, right? Like that they're the ones swinging the hammer, or they're the ones doing the books or whatnot. And like I lived through that nightmare for a couple years, and I realized um, something's got to change. Like this isn't working. And it was during that time that I started reading for the first time in my life. Like up until that point, I wasn't really a big book reader. Really, the only books that I had read were spiritual, scripture and that type of thing. So I decided to get involved in like self education. And one of the first books that I read, there was a couple books that were my initial foundation. One was Rich Dad Poor Dad, was just kind of shifting my mindset around money, investing, and that type of thing. But the second was The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And Tim Ferriss really got me thinking about like the efficiency and the way that I worked in my business. And my business partner did it as well. And during that time, I ended up launching a search engine optimization and SEO business in 2012. And I got it all set up on autopilot, had people working in the Philippines and India, and I was just like sending a couple of emails a month, and I was covering all my bills with that business. And I had my home security business that was also kicking in some money, but I just got bored. I'm just like, I don't know how to grow. I don't know how to scale, and I need to learn more. And so it was during that time, which I think you referred to earlier, I decided that there was more that I needed to know and learn by going and studying high growth CEOs. And so I took the opportunity, not as I'm giving up on entrepreneurship and I'm tucking my tail between my legs and going back to the workforce. I took the opportunity the next 4.5 years to go and study and get paid to study some of the best CEOs. And so over a 4.5 year period from 2012 to mid 2016, I went and worked for 3 different businesses that had 3 different incredible CEOs. And although I was getting a paycheck and doing the work, unlike everybody else that was there, I was sitting there taking notes of like what the CEO is doing, instead of in a meeting when he asked us to do something, instead of saying, okay, like, how do I do that? I would ask the question, like, what is the underlying issue? What gets him to make us want to do this, or make this request, or, why is he being so transparent in this particular situation? Or how is he handling, these difficulties of navigating this large business? And so it was over those 3 years that I experienced 2 different IPOs, initial public offerings, and so just saw massive, massive results and growth. And the last company I worked with, I worked with a good friend of mine who was who I'd worked with at these other 2 companies, and he started his business, and I wanted to go and work for a startup and see if I could go and apply these principles under somebody else's risk portfolio. Meaning, I wasn't taking the risk as long as I was getting a paycheck. I wasn't taking a risk, right? It was on him, but I could see if I could go and navigate these principles. And we grew that business in 2 years from 0 to 28 locations. and that was part of the, and we experienced part of an IPO there, and I realized, okay, I think I'm ready now. And like this whole time, people knew I was ready to go and start a business, and they would say, like, Chris, like, why don't you go and start a business? And I was just like, it's not ready. I'm not ready. I still got more. I need to learn a little bit more. And then when I did ultimately walk away from corporate America, I like people were shocked, like because I was making $500,000 a year. I had unlimited spend expense card on the credit card. Like I had all the incredible things that you would like that make a cush W-2 job amazing, right? Like no risk, all of the like some really good upside, all the good things that I was over recruiting. I was a vice president, all this stuff, and I walked away, and they're like, "Why?" And I'm just like, "Time's right." Like I was ready to go, and so it was. Over the next year, I spent time just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. It was funny when I walked away, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I was ready to get back in entrepreneurship, and I was going to start like really doing some study of where I wanted to be. And so I spent a year kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. I went and sold international energy projects. I took a course on Facebook marketing, and I drop shipped products all over the world. And then finally started putting two and two together of like, I just need to own a full top to bottom solar business, a residential solar business. And I didn't want to just be involved in the sales. I want to do the installs. And so started bringing in incredible people. We launched in October is when we filed our paperwork. November, we started our marketing. So that's kind of when we claimed as we started of 2017 out of my garage. And, the rest is history. We eventually became the fifth fastest growing of any private business in the United States. We grew in 4.5 years. I built up to 1,100 employees. My last year, so as my last year running the business, we sold off to private equity, and I continued to run it, and we did $233 million in revenue. And we did it all completely bootstrapped, no outside debt, no fundraising, and we just made all the right choices, and we did everything by design based on the playbook that I had created over the years of experience.
That's a ridiculous like meteoric rise, because I think a lot of people, when they hear nine figures, right, and they hear that size of a company, they probably think, oh, it probably took 10 years, maybe 15 years. Maybe it was a family business, because that's usually how it works. But the fact that you did it in like less than five, like 4.5, if that, from 2017, which literally feels like yesterday. That's 3 years before COVID, or 2.5 years before COVID, which feels like yesterday. It's just crazy to think about. What would you say were like the biggest levers that you pulled to actually enable you to grow that quickly?
I mean, there's a lot. We invested in all the right things. I would say most entrepreneurs fail because they want to appear successful before they are. And so they rob their business of growth capital, right? And so one of the biggest things from the beginning was me and my business partner, the same one that we had started the home security business together in 2011. We were co-founders of this business operating out of my garage, and so we kept fixed costs low, meaning we literally operated out of my shop, and we slowly built out my shop. It was unfinished at the time, and we slowly like would add drywall and do all the things and bring employees there. So we had low fixed costs, low overhead in the things that didn't matter. But in the things that did matter, like online marketing and brand presence and everything, we looked like $1 billion business, right? So we spent a lot of money on production. I had a videographer, was like one of my very first employees that we brought in house. Uh, Content creation, everything like that. We really focused on brand presence. I was Chris the Solar guy on all the Facebook lives and ads and everything else. And so that and for the first 8 months of our business, I didn't take a salary. I didn't take any money, even though we could have afforded it, right? Like my first year in business, which was 2018, and like I said, we started like advertising November 2017. 2018, we did $16 million in revenue with 4.2 million in net profit. But I didn't take a dime of that from a salary standpoint until July of 2018. And so for those first 8 months, the only way that I could even make money was if I went out and sold outside of normal office hours. So what I would do is I would actually operate from 8 to 5 inside the office, working on the business, building out systems and recruiting people and doing paperwork and all the other crap that's you have to do when you're a startup. And then in the evening from 5 to 9 o'clock, I would get in my car and I would go and hit appointments and I would sell customers in their home at their table, And so I'm away from the house at this point 13, 14 hours a day with drive time and everything else, even though I was operating out of my shop. And and it was a sacrifice that my wife was willing to support. And like I said, it was the only way that I could get paid. And I paid myself a commission that I would pay to every other employee. I didn't pay myself a bigger commission because I was an owner or anything like that. It was everything was within our budgets and exactly within our line. That was the most that we could pay ourselves. And so myself and my partner Daryl, like literally, that was the only way we made a paycheck. And and everything else got pounded into marketing and marketing and building. And so, one of our keys to growth is taking whatever our profit margin was the previous month and adding that to our marketing budget. And so I recommend that to anyone. Most people are scared to take that leap to spend more on marketing or to increase it by that drastic amount. But like that's what leads to 16 million a year to 233 million in a 5-year span, right? And for people that for the listeners that want to know, like this is our exact growth path look like this. We did 16 million year 1. We did 32 million year 2. We did 34 million year 3, which was COVID. But it wasn't necessarily the COVID that cut us down to 34 million. We spent a lot of money that year on like building our management team, dialing our processes, because we had grown a lot. We had suffered a lot from like the growth from 16 to 32 million. And so we spent our third year really just honing in things. And then after that, we went from 32 to 89 million. So we tripled in year 4. And then year 4 to 5, we went from 89 million to 233 million. And so, it's like that was the growth pattern and the structure. But once again, most people can't expect to go and hit 16 million out of the gates. The reason we hit 16 million out of the gates was because everything else that I had developed over the years of failure and like throwing down roots and creating a plan. And so, and then that's really like the key things that led to us. Like those were the strategies, and then the culture. Like at the end of the day, a business, like it's not just a buzzword. It has to be done by design. In fact, I sell like one of the things that I do for business owners is I coach them and consult them on culture. Right? I have a course for helping home product and service companies, home improvement companies, that focuses on 4 key aspects: culture, offer, accountability, and leadership. Right? Those are the 4 key levers that whenever I buy a business or I go in and consult a business, that's what I address. And it works, right? Like along that 5-year period, I had another solar company that was going to found. I came in and I consulted them. They gave me equity in exchange for consulting. And in a 3-year period, we were able to scale them to a 9-figure exit. Like using the same exact principles. We actually did it even faster than what we did at SoulGen. And along the same line, I got paid by another company to come in and do the same thing. And they exited for 9 figures. And so like this is a proven repeatable process. Like if you go and you focus on these things, and there's a lot of details that fall underneath, like what culture is, what an offer truly includes as far as like pricing and pay and marketing and sales and everything else, accountability and leadership. Like these are the core to any great business.
I mean, I don't want to get too biased here because my background is marketing and digital marketing, but being someone from the UK, right? We're almost like the US back in 2016, 2017 when you first like discovered Facebook ads and everything. And I know in the US now it's like a huge thing, like everyone and their dog is running Facebook ads, right?
Right.
But like if you speak to anyone, I'd say like 90% of businesses minimum in the UK have no idea what Facebook ads are. Everyone's on Google. They don't know what it means. They don't even know what it can do. Like I remember the when I first started, like the second or third call I ever got was from a guy in Scotland, and he was probably about 56, 57 at least. And I'm not even going to try the Scottish accent because it's impossible. But he told me like, "Can you get work from this?" Like he was talking about Facebook ads. Can you get work from it? And that's when it hit me, like just how ignorant a lot of people are of like just advertising in general. Like
Right.
advertising's been around for God knows how long, but
Beginning
like
of
social
time.
media advertise, yeah, exactly. David Ogilvy, it's been around for ages, and a lot of people are just ignorant of this like absolute superpower that you have, and social media advertising specifically is just like it's like steroids, right? Um, I want to get into that more, like, because you scaled very, very quickly within a short space of time, right? And to scale a company that quick, there's a lot you have to learn within a short period of time as well. You definitely had the advantage of that you already had a business before that, and you were already working for someone at a really high level as well. So you already probably learned a lot of business fundamentals from that experience. But what would you say were, like, for example, if you were hiring, right? If you were recruiting and you went just from like a 7 to 8, 8 to 9 figure burn rate very, very quickly, what were the key hires for you and your business that allowed you to actually get to that point? Like and if
Yeah.
you can
No,
even
that's
give
great.
an order of that as well, that's even better.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing that any business owner has to hire is an executive assistant, right? Because you need somebody to take off the low value, low energy things that drag you down every single day. This is like one of the things that I teach my people in my community is that you have to go and do a time audit and figure out where you're spending your time. Take 15 minutes, dial it every 15 minutes, like what did I do with my time? And assign it one, two, three, or $4 signs. And what that does is a $4 sign, meaning that is something that is going to bring a lot of value from a money standpoint into the business, right? One mean it's it's necessary, but you could also hire it out for super cheap, right? And so that like what it would cost to pay somebody to do that is the one, two, three, and four. And then you have high, medium, and low energy things, right? Sometimes there's things that are very valuable for dollar signs that give you low energy. You hate doing. Some people hate doing sales. Some people hate doing operations. Some people hate doing accounting, whatever it may be. And so figure out, break it down. What are the four quadrants? Quadrant number one is low energy, low value. Quadrant number two is low value, high energy. Quadrant number three is high value, low energy. Quadrant number four is high value, high energy. And where you really want to spend your life is in quadrant two and four. And the reason is there's things that bring you a lot of energy that maybe not be valuable. And this comes down to like everything in life. Like, for example, me and my wife, when I go and I hang out with my wife, it's not making me a lot of money, but it's a very high energy thing. It's what helps me function in life. And energy is as you the more money you make, the thing that you're going to chase is energy, right? Like what gets me excited, what gets me out of bed, what gets me super pumped up and everything to do it. And there's going to be things like I said that pay you a lot and things that pay you nothing. And so that's where the more wealthy you get, that's where you want to hang. And so the way you get rid of quadrant one and three is you got to start in quadrant one. Anything that's $20, $25 an hour work and low energy, you got to get that off your plate. You got to get that over to an executive assistant. So that's key number one. The other, along those same lines would probably be a bookkeeper. A bookkeeper is absolutely necessary to the business. Maybe a two $6 value or maybe a $3 value, but typically low energy. Unless you're an accountant that's starting a business, usually that's not going to be the thing that you absolutely love and get you amped up for, right? But then you have things like sales. Sometimes it's like a medium energy, but pays you a lot of money by going out and doing the work. You got to figure out how to get that replaced. But maybe that's what you absolutely love to do. And so you need to bring a CEO in or somebody else that's going to go and do like the high level steering, the high value, high energy, or what they deem as high value, high energy, but you actually like sales, then get into that. And so, you know, some of the key things that are absolutely necessary. I think every CEO needs to understand their marketing. They don't have to do their marketing, but they have to understand their marketing. They got to understand a strategy, because most people, their marketing strategy is a hope and a prayer, and they hire an outside agency to do it. And I know it sounds like you may do some of this type of agency work, and so this might hurt your feelings a little bit, but like, uh, don't hire an agency unless you understand the strategy and the direction that you can give to that agency, right? Like the only reason you should ever hire somebody in the marketing realm, hire somebody or outside, is if you can give them direction. If you're just like, here's money, please figure it out, it'll never work, because nobody cares about your brand, your product as much as you do. And so you need to understand your brand, your product, the way that you are being seen by the world, and why people are taking action on your product. And so that was one of the things that I recommend to everybody, like go understand your marketing, and then go and make an incredible marketing hire. So like my CMO was one of the best hires I ever made about 2 years in. And the reason why it was one of the best hires is it was taking up a lot of my time, a lot of my energy. And although like I loved it and everything, there were things that gave me more energy, like vision and direction and strategy, than marketing did. And so that was one of the things that I needed to farm off and get off my table. But just taking this type of strategy and just constantly auditing what brings me the most energy and the most value, and I need to do more of that. And where is it less energy, less value, and how can I farm that out? But once again, if it's high energy, low value, don't necessarily get rid of those, because those are great things, right? Like go spend time with your kids, go spend time with your family, do meditation, go give the sales training if you just absolutely love doing, or go occasionally swing a hammer if it's like really energetic for you. But you always have to you need to spend the most time in the high energy, high value, and then the next most time in the high energy, low value.
I love that you mentioned that about agencies and about not understanding the whole process yourself first before outsourcing it, because that probably is applicable to like pretty much any part of your business, right? Whether it is marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's pretty much any important part of your business, and marketing and sales are probably the two most important. But like I get it all the time, right? People hop on a call, and when I ask them, have you ever run Facebook ads before? Or have you ever done anything related to advertising before? They just say, no, I have no idea how it works. And I just know that's going to be a really like hard call or hard conversation to have, because one, they won't even understand the value. Like if I tell them the numbers they're going to have to spend, and you already know the numbers, and when we're going to get into the numbers that you spent in soon, but like they're just going to be like, there's no way I can afford that. There's just absolutely no way I'm spending that much in advertising. And this is such a coincidence. I had a conversation with one of my uncles about 2 months ago, and he runs a solar company in the UK, and he was telling me about how he did all of his marketing himself before outsourcing it. And he spends quite a lot. He spends about 100K a month on ads, right? Which a lot of people listening might be like, "What the hell? That's ridiculous." And when I say how much you spend on ads, they might just blow their brains out or something. But like it's true, because a lot of people don't understand it. And like one thing that I did as well, right in the beginning, is I literally did everything on my own. So me and my business partner, we had an internal call center at our last agency that was in the health and wellness space, and in that, before we even hired anyone to take calls, we did all the calls ourselves. Right, we literally would do about 100 to 200 calls every single day ourselves, doing the most pointless calls. Like people would pick up, they'd be in the car, or they'd be like drunk or whatever, and we'd have to speak to them and try and book them in. And in our heads, I remember at the time I was like, why the heck are we doing this? But then when it came to recruiting someone to do that, it was the easiest job in the world because we knew what it would take and we could train them so easily because we'd done it. We probably took at least 500 to 1,000 calls each between the both of us, so we knew exactly what it took. And that's something that a lot of business owners shy away from. They try and
Yep.
outsource every single thing of their business, and they think they can just. We touched on this in episode 2 as well, but they think they can just go on a beach somewhere and every part of their business is going to be done by an agency or by someone else, and it's all going to be smooth, and they're just going to take all the profits and be happy with their lives. But that's not how it works.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
there's a fine line. You got to be willing to do everything within your business, but you've also got to work to get out of your business all the time. Because what happens is, people will agree with you and like, oh yeah, so I need to know how to do the work, and they start doing the work, and then they never get out of the work, right? And then there's the opposite where they hire everything out and they have no idea what's going on. They can't give any control or strategy, and so there's that fine line that is necessary, and there's not necessarily a time frame that you need to spend in doing it, but you do need to understand the ins and outs of everything and the way it functions in your business.
100%. And one thing I want to touch on as well, and you mentioned it before, but you said you had a business partner, right?
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people, when they are starting a company, the first thing they do is find their best friend and make them their business partner, and they start a company together. Other people don't do that. Other people are like very much like, this is me. I want to own 100%, right? All that. How does someone decide whether they should even have a business partner in the first place? And if they do go with a business partner, how should they decide who that is as well?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in partners, right? Like, although I've had really terrible partnerships over the years, like I've never met a billionaire that did it completely on his own, right? So you see Steve Jobs, he had Steve Wozniak, right? You see, like, all these guys have, even if they are the face of their business, they always have somebody behind the scenes that was really with them through the tough times. And so, yeah, there's no solopreneur billionaires out roaming, at least that I know of, unless they made it completely lucky with like GameStop and Bitcoin or something. But outside of those like completely one-off scenarios, partnerships are absolutely necessary. And yeah, most people get it wrong. They, like you said, they hire their best friend or person they really like or whatnot. And frankly, like me and my business partner, like we didn't start off as best friends. We were associates early on. Like we met each other when we were young, when we were teenagers. My oldest sister married Daryl's oldest brother. And so we're almost family, but we're not, right? Like we don't share any blood or anything. But, like, during those years, Daryl was a couple years older than me, and Daryl had 2 younger brothers that I hung out with more, and me and Daryl just didn't really get along. Then we started working together when I was 21. He was my manager, sales manager, and we kinda had a good experience, and we've built, like, our friendship over the years. So now we're really good friends, but for us, like, it's always been, like, our business relationship and that has driven the friendship rather than the vice versa. Because frankly, when you're working with just friends or family, it's really difficult to have hard conversations. And so our group that I my management group that I built over time, like we have become best friends, but it typically did not start off that way. It was hiring for the right skills, the right and so because of that, we've been able to have extremely hard conversations, very frank conversations, very direct, and giving people uh uh being willing to conflict, right? Like most teams, as we read in the 5 dysfunction of the team, because they lack trust, they're unwilling to conflict. And confliction, being able to argue a point, is very important to a healthy team. But that only exists when there's high trust. And so we built just incredible. So when you're looking for a partner, you gotta say, can we build trust? And there's two different types of trust. There's trust of character and trust and ability. Trust of character is, do you trust your grandma? Right? Of course, yeah, I trust grandma. I love her. She's great. Trust and ability is, do you trust grandma to perform open heart surgery on you? And you know, unless she's an open heart surgeon, the answer is no. And so, like, realizing that you have to have both of those in a partnership, in any successful team, that you have to have both trust and character, and trust and ability, and that is built over time. And I love that, you know, Stephen R. Covey, in his book Speed of Trust, he talks about trust is like a bucket with water that is filled one drop at a time and can be lost with one kick. And so, understanding that, like, that's going to be a slow process. And so whenever I set up a partnership, I got to make sure that there's proper earnout, proper operating agreements, where there's a lot of contingencies. If you don't do this, then X, right? And so with any partnership, I'm going to make sure that we can get through the 6-month honeymoon phase. What I found in business is that no honeymoon lasts longer than 6 months. Sometimes it only lasts 2 days, and sometimes it does almost all the way up to 6 months, but never longer than 6 months. After working together for 6 months, you're going to realize, do I like working with this person? Do they show up every single day? Are they a person of their word? Right? Do they do what they say they were going to do? Is there high level of trust? Do we conflict on a good level? And so, if you can make it through 6 months, you can make it through 60 years. And so that's the way I structure all my partnerships. I make sure that there's nothing concrete or clad until after 6 months of working together.
That's interesting, and I think it's similar to marriages because I remember reading like a statistic somewhere, and I don't know how accurate it is, obviously, but it was something like 80% of marriages that get past the first 12 months end up lasting over 20 years, right? And it's probably very similar as a for a business partner because that first 6 months and even a year is going to be that honeymoon phase. And the second they start doing things wrong, that's when you're going to realize, like, maybe I've made the wrong decision here.
Yep.
And like you said, there's like a resistance to conflict, especially if that business partner is a friend of yours. And the main reason that probably is because people don't want to lose that friendship. So they have that like resistance. They don't want to argue with them because they're like, oh, maybe he's not going to be my friend anymore, or
Right.
if we're not business partners, then maybe we're not going to be friends anymore, or something like that. So that's a very interesting perspective. Now, with Solgen, right? One thing I want to ask you is when you were scaling, because this is more of a personal question, right? It's more of like a nerdy question on my end. But when you were spending that much money on ads, first of all, to get to address the elephant in the room, how much money were you spending on ads a month?
At the height of our business, before I stepped down as CEO, we were spending 2.2 million a month in online marketing.
I'm
And
gonna
we
let that
had
sink
we
in.
had an in-house marketing team of about 30.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. I mean, yeah, that's ludicrous. And I think first of all, you can only do that if you have an audience for it. And I'm pretty sure solar in the US is very national, right? Like you covered the whole of US.
We did not. We had 18 locations in 8 different states. So we were
Mhm.
only in 8 of the 50.
Wow. So you still had like room to you still I mean even today I'm assuming you probably still have room to grow as a company.
Oh yeah, there's a room to grow. So yeah, I'm no longer involved in the day to day. I have a small equity piece left after selling off to private equity. I function as a chairman of the board, but yeah, I'm not involved really there. But yeah, there's definitely room, and when people think like, oh man, the population must be huge in those 8 states. No, people just knew we were a household name in every single one of those states. Like, you scroll Facebook, you're gonna see, and you're a homeowner, you're seeing a Solgen ad.
Yeah. I mean that's crazy. And when you were spending that much or first of all, what one thing I do want to find out is was that all on Facebook or did you do diversify your spend across all the other
Facebook,
platforms?
Instagram, YouTube, Google, TikTok. Yeah.
TikTok's a cool one. I've dabbled in TikTok myself. If
Yeah.
if a contractor is thinking about doing social media advertising or doing any type of advertising, where would you suggest their focus to be first in terms of learning it and figuring out how to do it?
I mean, it really depends what your target market is. If it's 50 to 70-year-olds, most of those guys are hanging out on Facebook. If you want the 25 to 45-year-old women, they're hanging out on Instagram. If you want the 25 to 45-year-old men, they're hanging out on YouTube. And then if you just want a mix of men and women in the 25 to 50, they're hanging out on TikTok.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. I've just noticed, I don't know how we're already 55 minutes in, which has blown my mind. Um, so what I'm going to do is I've stolen an idea from Diary of a CEO, which I'm sure you've heard of their podcast. But what Stephen does is he asks a question to the next guest, essentially. So before I get your question, I'm going to ask you a question from last episode, and it was a really good one. I'll be interested to hear your answer on it. But essentially, Josh from last episode asked, because you're a solo contractor, if you could stay your career path in any other direction or in any other industry, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
What industry would I be?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I would shift. I mean, really anything in the home service, high ticket. In the U.S., it's roofing. Roofing is fantastic. HVAC is fantastic. Windows are fantastic. There's actually a plethora of high ticket for me. Like the more dollars in a ticket size, the more money I can spend on marketing.
yeah. That's something that a lot of people don't realize. They think that to advertise to the general public, they need to sell something very cheap and very like inexpensive that everyone can afford, right? Because that's what they think. Um, but can you talk a bit about the importance of having that margin to actually have that marketing spend towards it?
Absolutely. If you're not at the top of your industry for the price point that you're charging, you're screwing yourself. Like there's only two strategies that work in the marketplace: the most expensive or the cheapest. Those are the two. And unless you have extremely proficient systems and you're willing to cut corners on the value that you provide, don't go the cheapest route. Right? Like if you want to provide a good quality product to your customer with a great experience, do not try being cheap and do not try being middle of the road, because middle of the road will always be undercut by the cheapest. The cheapest will always undercut you, whether you're the highest or the middle of the road. So if you're getting undercut, you might as well get undercut when being the highest. And when you're the highest, it allows for more value to the customer, which you have two customers, more value to your internal employees, which are your customer, more value to your end user, which means better product, better service, better warranties, being able to fulfill on everything, staying in business long term because you have great margin in your profitability. So you're going to continue to be able to serve them for decades to come. And then it allows for mistakes, right? Like there will be mistakes made in the business. And unless you have margin, you will not be able to afford to make those mistakes.
100%, 100%. Now, last two questions. Well, it's the last question technically because I'm going to get your question after this one, but I want to touch on your education, right? Because nowadays a lot of people have high resistance to things like courses, right? Programs, coaching programs, all of that. People get the ads for them all the time nowadays, and there's a loads of people offering them. So I want to talk about your education. First of all, have you spent money on online education?
A
And
lot of
should
money,
other
a lot of,
contractors do that? Yeah,
I mean, since 2015, I've spent $1 million on my personal education. And that's outside of traditional education. I was a college dropout when I started my first business, and almost all my education has come from being in the right room, being in the right mastermind, being at the right workshop, being with the right coach. And so I pay to get in rooms because I know for every dollar spent, I'm going to make 10, 20, 100x return. It's been the best investments I've ever made. Better performing in the stock market, better performing than my real estate portfolio is the money that I spend on my education. And frankly, it's tough. Like when you first start doing it, when you make that first leap, it feels hard. I actually did a Facebook Live this morning on my account talking about this exact thing. Like when I invested my first dollar in my education was, or first real money, I had spent money on like $500 events or books or like a little bit of courses. In 2017 is when I spent my first real money. It was $2,500 on a Facebook drop shipping course, right? And that's where I learned ads. And 25 at that moment, in my life, I was making about, $400,000 a year. So it was less than 1% of my annual income. And I was scared to spend it. I was like, because I just didn't understand this, like that. Meanwhile, I'm investing 10, 20, 30% of my income into real estate and stock. I'm spending less than 1% on my personal education. And I went and I made that leap. And that was really what changed my trajectory. And up until that point, like I said, I'd been attending events like once a quarter, like $500 events and stuff like that. And those were really cool. But then after, like, I realized that like this education can change my life. I'm like, okay, who can I give 50 grand to? Who can I give 100 grand to? Like, where can I get these 20, 30, 100x returns? And, because the battle all of us against is time. And if I can pay money to shrink down time, it's better. Cause like $1 million over 20 years and $1 million over a day is the same amount of money. The only difference is time, right? Like when people think about $1 million, like, oh, that's a lot of money. Well, is it over 20 years? No, it's only 50 grand a year. That sucks, right? But $1 million over a day. So like the question I always have to ask myself is, what would I pay to shrink down that time, that window, to have the knowledge, be in the right room, take the right actions where I can do $1 million in a day? And so for me, like, dude, and and frankly, I don't care if anybody listening to this ever buys a single thing from me, right? Like I have courses, I have coaching and consulting and everything because that's like what I'm passionate about. You don't have to spend a dollar from me, but what I hope I can convince you to do is spend money somewhere on someone that's going to give you a return on investment and really build your own personal education. Like that's where I hope I can change everybody's mind, is that like that is when the trajectory of my life changes, once I started investing myself through coaches, consultants, events, masterminds, all the things.
Yeah, I mean, people are very, very, I mean, people apply to spend money on university and colleges, right? Like, that's the crazy thing about that whole concept of education, is that forget about being convinced to spend the money. You apply. Like, I mean, I did it. I went to university, right? Or you guys call it college, but you literally apply to universities and you literally ask them, like, can I give you my money? That's the crazy thing about it. But in terms of the online space, people are very tight-fisted and they don't want to do anything. They might not even spend $50 if that's
Which
the
I
price point.
understand. There's a lot of shammy people out there. Like the best thing you can do is spend money on someone that has a proven track record, right? That has testimonials and has done it themselves. And like that's one thing that separates me from the crowd. It's like, look, I'm not just somebody that's teaching you to do something that I have no idea about. Like I've gone and I've run the roadmap and now I'm showing you the roadmap. Right. And so like find somebody like that that can go and teach. So I understand the hesitancy because there are a lot of shammers and everything else. Just like anything, do your homework, look at the reviews, and find somebody that you can build trust with.
Yeah, 100%. You need to do your homework. That's perfect. Well, Chris, the last thing I'm gonna get from you before I let you go is a question. So if you can kindly think of a question. I know I put all the guests on the spot. Some of the questions are amazing, though. All the questions have been very good up to now. But the next guest is a old school residential contractor. He's from the US as well, actually. But if you could ask a question to a US contractor, what would it be?
To a U.S. contractor, hmm, that's a good question. I would say, what is the thing in your career that has brought you the most happiness?
That's a great one. That's a brilliant one. Perfect. Thank you very much for your time, Chris. I'm sure, like, people, if they've not learned anything from this podcast, then probably need to listen to it over and over again, because there's been so many gems in this. Like, you need to really like think about it and take everything in and take action from it, because that's the main purpose of it, is that you actually take action and you don't just listen to it for as entertainment, pretty much. So thank you very much again, Chris, for hopping on. You can find Chris's links in the description. They'll be the first ones there. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Spotify, drop a follow. And we'll see you guys next time.